What's up, developers? This is chapter 9 of my Cloudflare and Hono course, and in this chapter, we're going to be adding a Cloudflare D1 database to our project. First, we'll create our database for staging, and then second, we'll create a database for local development. So let's jump in. Here I am on the Cloudflare documentation for D1, and they have some instructions on how to create a database. So their first step is regarding their tutorial project. So we're going to skip over that and we're going to jump down here to the command that actually creates a Cloudflare database. So we can go ahead and copy that, and then we can jump over to VS Code. And then here for my terminal, what I want to do is install Wrangler globally so I can run these Wrangler commands from any location. So to do that, I can say bun add -g for global and then Wrangler. And now that's installed. And then if I paste the command that they provided us here, so let's break this down. So I no longer need npx because I have Wrangler installed globally, and I don't need Wrangler at latest because it's installed. So what I just need is Wrangler D1 create, and then this prod D1 tutorial is the name of the database. So I'm going to delete that name and we're going to name it something else. We're going to have separate staging and production databases, so it makes sense to call this, for me, Dojo Staging DB. And Dojo because this waitlist idea is around JavaScript Dojo for me. So now if I click enter, all right, so we get this messaging. Successfully created the database, which is awesome. And then to access your D1 in your worker, add the following script configuration to your configuration file. And then here we have this chunk of code. And it says, would you like Wrangler to add it on your behalf? So we're going to say yes. That makes our life a little bit easier. And then what binding name would you like to use? So I'm going to use the binding name of just DB. And then for local development, do you want to connect to a remote resource instead of local resource? No. When I'm developing locally, I like to just have everything on my local computer so I'm not messing with something out in the cloud. All right, so now it's all done. Let's see what happened. What did it do for us? And we can see over here in the Git control, it made some changes to the Wrangler JSON-C file. And we can see those changes are right here. Let's go ahead and close out of that Git version and just open up the Wrangler JSON-C. And we can see, so this is all the same. The environments are the same, and this is the new chunk of code that it's added. Now, the thing is, this staging database is specific to the staging environment. So I'm actually going to move this. I'll highlight this and then hold down Alt, and I can just up arrow, put a comma there, and now this database is specifically nested under our staging environment. So now, if we go ahead and deploy this, we're going to see that this database will be bound to our staging environment. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. So here we can open up the package.json to get a refresher on how we deploy. So we can run our dry run staging and then deploy staging. So dry run to make sure that there are no errors. All right, so no errors in the logs there, and we can see here in our bindings, we now have a binding for our database, our D1 database. So, and it says the name there too, Dojo Staging DB. So everything is looking good here. And now I'll go ahead and deploy it to staging. All right, everything was pushed up. So let's jump over to our Cloudflare dashboard. And then from here, if I go down to compute and I check out my workers and I see my Cloudflare staging worker, I go ahead and click on that and scroll down, we can see our bindings. And now here we have our D1 database binding. So this is great. We can see in our dashboard that our application is connected to this database. And if I click on that, it actually jumps us over here. You can see it navigated us to storage and database, D1 SQL databases, and then it brought us over to Dojo staging database. So it linked us right over there. If you want to look at all of your D1 databases, you can just click here, and then you'd be able to see your entire list. So here I just have the one, and I click on it, and I can see all sorts of different information like total queries and um, kind of usage of the database. So that's really handy. And then we can also go over to the console, and here we can run SQL queries against our database. So this is super cool. Um, what we can do is grab their demo query that they had from the documentation just to make sure our database is working correctly. And if I scroll down, okay, it's going to say binding your worker. We already did that. That is adding that chunk of code, which happened automatically, and then run a query against your database. So cool. They give us this little chunk of code. It creates a customers table with like 3 customers. So let's copy that, and we can actually plug that right in here. Just copy it in and click execute, and this query was successful. So now we can come over to explore data, and we can really jump inside of our database, which is really nice. And here we can see the customers table. So it created this, and if I click on that, we can see the 4 different customers that it created. So all of this is super good. Basically, in summary, we can see that our staging database is up and running, and it's connected to our staging application. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and delete this customers table because this was just for testing purposes. And here it has a little security. All right, and now that's gone. So now let's talk about our local database. So we want to be able to test out locally. So if we run our local script, run dev, let's see what happens now that we have that new configuration in there. All right, so if I come up here and I take a look at this, we see bindings, but I don't see the database as one of my bindings. And so let's go ahead and close the server. The reason why we don't see that binding is because we made it specific to staging. This database is only applicable to staging. So that's a good thing. For starters, we just want our staging database to be connected to our staging instance, but we need a way to bind a local database. So to do that, we can copy this code and we can come up outside of the environments and we can paste it here. And it's giving me a little formatting issue. So there we go. Okay. So now that we have our database, we have another database actually outside of our environments. This one will run for local because we're not specifying any environment when running locally. So what we want to do then is right now this is pointing at our staging database. I want to delete that and put a fake ID, and then let's change this from staging to local. And I want the bindings to be the same because this binding will actually be used in the code when we are interacting with our database. So we want our code to work across all environments, but depending on the environment, we just want it to access a different database, whether it's staging, prod, or local. So now that we have this here, if we try running our dev script again, run dev, all right, we have some progress. We can see here we now have the environment database Dojo local database binding is now here. So that's looking good. We now have this database, and we should be able to find our database over here in our folder structure because this is a local SQLite database. So here in the .wrangler folder, we can open this up, take a look at state, and there's a folder for D1. If we open this up, there's no file. So the reason there's no file is because SQLite databases get created when you first connect to them or run a query. And since our application is not actually running a query or connecting to the instance at the moment, no file was created. But that's okay. We can simulate that and make sure that we get a local database up and running. So let's jump over to the documentation again. And taking a look here, we can put this query into a schema.sql file, and then we can use this command to run it. And here you can see they have the flag -- local. So here, this example, they are testing it out locally before actually running this on their own prod database. And so this is what we want to do. We want to run a SQL file on our local database. So let's copy that command and jump back over to VS Code. And then we need that SQL file. So let's create that. And this will just be a temporary file. We will delete this later. And then I can shrink that down and come over to, there we go. So there is my SQL. Everything's looking good. And then if I open up the terminal again and I paste that other command, the npx wrangler execute one, now I need to make a couple of adjustments here. So this can stay the same because we named the file schema SQL, just like that up there. And local, that's good, that's what we want. And here, though, that is the name of the database, which for here I have dojo local db. That's the name of my database. And then execute can stay the same. And D1 and npx, I can delete that because I globally installed Wrangler. Okay, so let's give it a go. All right, so the command ran successfully, resource location local. And if you want to run SQL commands on your staging or prod database, you can use the -- remote flag. But that's not what we're doing here. So it seems that everything worked. Let's go double check it. If we come back up here, nice. Now we see that we have a SQLite database. So if I go ahead and click on this, and kind of shrink that down, we can see we have a customers table, and we have those 4 customers from the SQL command that they added in. So this is awesome. Our local database is there. It's functioning. We're able to interact with it, and our application can will now connect to it as well for local development. So the thing is, we don't really have an easy way to interact with our database right now. We were running terminal commands in order to get this code in there. So in the next chapter, we're going to introduce Drizzle ORM. And Drizzle will allow us to query our database, create database tables, and run migrations, and all around manage our database. So that will make our life easier. All right, that's all for now. Happy coding and Godspeed.